Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Healthy Cooking class number 2. My name is Chef Scott Sanfilippo. It's good to see you all here today. Today, I wanted to discuss a couple things. I wanted to take a look at mise en place, which is sort of a way that we think and move throughout the kitchen, safety, sanitation, thinking through a project and working through the project, things like that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about sanitation. We're going to discuss different types of contaminants, how do we protect ourselves from them, and some things that we should be concerned with and things to look out for in the kitchen while we're cooking. Also, I think I'd like to discuss a little bit about proteins. We use a lot of pork, beef, pork, chicken, and seafood most often in the kitchen. So I wanted to discuss a little bit about the chemical breakdown of each. Like how much water is in each, how much fat is in each, how that contributes to the cooking process that we need to use for each different cuts of meat, and also how long they're going to cook and things along that sort. We're going to discuss different types of proteins, some complementary proteins, and things like that. Today's meal, I was going to make some breaded chicken breasts, but we're not going to do the standard breading, flour, egg, and breadcrumb, and then pan fry it. We're going to try to keep this a little bit healthier by making a mixture of breadcrumbs with olive oil and good seasonings, and put that on top of our chicken and bake it in the oven until it's done. And that'll be about, nice 400-degree oven, and we'll get back to that. So the chicken, I wanted to do breaded chicken. I wanted to teach everyone how to make some couscous, super simple and easy. This one I am doing, making with some fresh chives from the garden, because we have chives right now. So I think it's a perfect thing, and it's so good. So we're going to do that as well. And I wanted to do some marinated roasted zucchini. And it's sort of like how I approach making a salad dressing as well, which is one of the things I do want to discuss in a further class. So this will give you an idea of the basis that I use for my salad dressings as well. This marinade for our zucchini. So before we get into the actual cooking of today's meal, I wanted to talk a little bit about mise en place. Mise en place is a French term. It actually means, I'm going to read the actual definition for you, to have all the ingredients necessary for a dish prepared and ready to combine up to the point of cooking. So it means have everything ready to go, measured out in your separate little bowls, organized so that you can just put it together and cook it. Oftentimes when we're in the professional kitchen, mise en place goes beyond that, where we have to have every spoon in place, everything that we need for our service for the evening. Our station should have everything, because once we are in the throes of service, you cannot go looking for a spoon. You don't have time. So we try to have everything in its place, mise en place. Chefs will jokingly say mess in place, get your mess in place. But it's important, especially when I'm doing a demonstration. So I do have all of the things that we need for today's meal measured out and ready to go. Can you see? We've got the zucchini, we've got our chicken breasts over there, we've got salt and pepper, and I have my balsamic vinegars and things like that. So everything is here at the ready. So when I'm ready to start cooking, we can go ahead and just put it together and do it. It's important for us to be thoughtful in the kitchen. Kitchen safety and kitchen awareness is always very important. I train my students in the classes to walk with the knives pointing downward at their side when walking in the kitchen, because you tend to walk and talk and things like that, and it tends to be dangerous. Always just be careful, because the kitchen is one of the most dangerous places in the house. I'm telling you things that you already know, but it's true. One thing you might not be totally privy to is sanitation. And contaminants. Let's see. Sanitation is important, obviously. One of the things, we are going to be working with some protein. So I want to give you a recipe that I use at the house, that we use at the house. And that is for a spray bottle of bleach water mixture that I like to spray on our surfaces that we've been using chicken or fish or things like that. It's a mixture. It's all ready to go in the spray bottle. You wipe down your cutting board as best you can. You spray it and let that sit on there for at least 30 seconds to do its sanitizing, and then we wash it off. So I will show you that. The mixture that I like to use is 1 teaspoon of bleach to 1 quart of water, and it seems to work pretty well. Too much bleach can be dangerous, so we try to keep that to a minimum, but still have enough sanitizing power. And it's important to remember, I think, if you have water that is too hot, I believe that it evaporates the sanitary properties of the bleach. So we try to use room temperature cold water for something like that, and that should work out the best. So we try to clean our surface, spray that on there, allow it to set for about 30 seconds, and then we can use soap and water and finish the cleaning process. We as professionals try to concern ourselves with contaminants, contamination of food in many different varieties. We talk about biological contaminants, we talk about chemical contaminants, and we talk about physical contaminants. Biological contaminants are bacteria or microorganisms that are harmful and create foodborne illness. So we try to work within the sanitary means to keep those to a minimum, to prevent those as much as possible. Food handling and keeping equipment clean and things like that is all part of our daily routine. Even in between different tasks, different proteins, we will wipe down and sanitize our equipment as well. So biological is mostly bacteria, microorganisms that we try to keep to a minimum. I'll show you a couple different ways to keep those down in the further discussion, but for now, that's biological contaminants. Physical contaminants are food contaminated by a foreign object, and we don't like to talk about that too much, but that is basically something falling into our food that should not be there. Chemical contaminants is where we find certain chemicals in places that they shouldn't be, or if they're in a concentration that is higher than what is allowed. Bleach in higher concentrations in the kitchen or in your pot washing sink is a perfect example of that. We are able to measure that to make sure that our parts per million are within the boundaries of where they should be. Okay, so sanitation, what does that mean in the home? Well, I do try to spray down our cutting boards, and we do try to sanitize as much as possible. The dishwasher will do that for you. So that is an easy way to make sure that things are getting clean and sanitized properly. We try to avoid cross-contamination. It's a term that everybody's probably heard. It's a transfer of contaminants or bacteria from one surface or a food or a piece of equipment to another where they shouldn't be. One of the main things that I try to teach people is to work with vegetables on your cutting surface before you work with contaminant potentially hazardous proteins like chicken. I try to do all my vegetable chopping and everything before I bring out the chicken and even put it on the cutting board. That's just a standard rule that we follow, and it's good practice at home as well. And we always try to store our proteins, the chicken and things, on the lowest shelf in the refrigerator so that they do not drip onto other things as well and contaminate them. But cross-contamination is big, and we try to wipe down our surface, keep it clean, even in between tasks, like I was saying. I think you understand that. One of the things that I should talk about as far as trying to keep foodborne illness at bay, we try to cook our foods, we store them at proper temperatures, and we cook them to proper temperatures. And I will give you an idea of what the time danger zone is. You need to store you should remember 41 degrees time and temperature danger zone, 41 degrees to 140 degrees. And what that means is proteins and things should be stored below 41 degrees refrigerator temperature or above 140 degrees. The danger zone is between 40 degrees, 41 degrees and 140 degrees. That is the temperatures where bacteria likes to really be active and multiply exponentially. So it's like keeping a chicken breast out at 70 degrees on a warm summer day at your your table for a couple hours. That would do it. The time portion of that is 4 hours. Nothing should be left out for 4 hours or greater, something that is potentially hazardous. So when we receive our chicken or our meat proteins, animal proteins, we will test them at the door to make sure that they're at their proper packing temperature, refrigerator temperature, or frozen, or whatever they should be. And then we will store them in the refrigerator in their proper place, the lower shelves, vegetables above, and things like that. And then when it comes to food handling, we have to make sure that people are cleaning the product well, they are cleaning their surfaces well, their equipment and everything like that. And then we have to make sure that it's cooked well as well. And that is all part of a plan. In a professional kitchen, that is all part of a HACCP plan that we have to sort of put together for each product. But for us, we should keep our proteins in the refrigerator or freezer, 40 to 41 degrees or colder. Or once we cook them, we should cook them to an internal temperature of at least 140 degrees. We're going to talk about the instant read thermometers, which I have, which are very handy. You can get them at the local grocery store. And these are nice. The digital ones are great because they are always accurate. These ones with the dial, they're old school, but they work great, and they're a little bit cheaper, but occasionally you need to calibrate them. On the back is, let's see if I can show you, a little calibrating nut. And what I do is I will plunge this into cold ice water and hold the nut and turn the dial until it reaches 32 degrees. That's how we calibrate this. I'll give a demonstration of that later on. To take internal temperatures is the best way to know whether or not your chicken is done, your whole chicken, your whole turkey, your steak, all that stuff. To use one of these thermometers and put it in where it's the meatiest, and take that internal temperature, and then you can figure out exactly where it is during the cooking process. Okay, everybody, here I thought I would give you a demonstration on how I calibrate my thermometers real quick. I have two different thermometers in here, and one is right on at 32 degrees, and the other one is reading 38 degrees. So what I will do is take my pliers and put it in the water and twist it until it gets to set that right at 32 degrees. If you can see that. And that one is now calibrated as well. And that's it. Okay, so we have discussed a little bit about mise en place, how to work and think and move and organize in the kitchen. We discussed a little bit about sanitation, a couple different types of contaminants that we watch out for. Definitely the time and temperature danger zone is something to keep in mind. And we also discussed a little bit about food safety and food sanitation. Food safety is basically just handling the food in a safe manner from the time that it comes and to the time that you cook it. And food sanitation is making sure that your equipment and your your work surfaces and everything is sanitized. And I wanted to discuss a little bit about protein. We most often use beef and pork and chicken and fish when we're cooking at home. They all have different chemical compositions. They all have different strengths and toughnesses, and they will all cook at different lengths of time, depending on the ratio of fat and water and density and things like that. When talking about proteins, mostly we're going to discuss animal proteins, beef, pork, chicken, seafood. What is protein? Protein is basically made up of amino acids. Animal proteins are composed of mostly water, a bit of protein, which we use for energy and muscle development, and then fat as well. Each of the different animals that we use have different fat components that chicken's going to be the leanest. Red meat is probably going to be the fattiest, and they're going to cook at different times in different ways. We discussed a little bit earlier alternative sources of protein. We have quinoa, which is a complete source of protein in and of itself. This is a grain. It's a small grain that comes from South Africa. It cooks very much like pasta, where you bring a certain amount of water. It's usually 2 to 1 for this, 2 parts of water to 1 part of quinoa. And you'll bring the water to a boil, pouring the quinoa in, and it has a little, when it separates and opens up, it's done. And that usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes, the same length as pasta. So salted water if you want. I sometimes put a little bit of olive oil in the water just for flavoring. Once it's boiling, you pour the quinoa in, give it a stir, let it cook for a few minutes, and it'll absorb the moisture, and it'll start to open up a little bit. And then it's delicious all by itself, but we like to cook it with some fresh herbs. It's really good with butter, but we're using olive oil. And we also have some couscous, which is what we're going to be cooking today. This is something that I got, the stuff that I got at the grocery store. This is super easy to cook. That cooks in just a couple of minutes. It's a semolina product, which means that it is durum wheat. So it's a wheat product. It's made like pastas. It's very similar to semolina is the flour that we like to use for pastas. Couscous is, the dough is rubbed into little tiny, and then it's agitated like that, and it comes out in these little tiny balls. Do I have any here to show you? Yeah. I'm using the plain today, but you can also purchase at the grocery store couscous that has a flavored mix that goes along with it as well. Today, I just want to show you how to cook couscous and how I like to flavor it. And we're going to use a little bit of olive oil and some fresh chives from the garden. Some other alternative protein that we use often is beans and rice. Lentils and rice, chickpeas and rice. I have some black beans that we grew in the garden last year, and this is a long grain white rice that I like to use. Also, an excellent source of complete protein is seaweeds. If you like sushi or seaweed salad, that's an excellent source of complete protein. Quinoa, like I said, is a complete source of protein. And then nuts and seeds will also give you a lot of the protein needs that you need throughout the course of the day. Let's talk a little bit about protein composition real quick, because it'll help us in our cooking process and how we think about the beef and the pork and the fish. Beef and pork and chicken, are all 75% water. They're all basically have at least about 75% water. That does vary from animal to animal and how they're raised and fed and things like that. For just basic purposes, about 75% water. Protein contents in beef is about 20%, and this is per 100 grams. This was measured. 20% protein in beef and 1.8% fat. So it's low fat, but in pork, 75% water, 22% protein, and 1.2% fat. It's similar to beef. And then when you get into chicken, 75% water, 22% protein, but only 0.09 fat. So it's very, very lean. And of course, these are just basic cuts. You can get leaner cuts of any one of these. But these are just some basic numbers for you to check out. When we're talking about beef protein, pork proteins, different parts of the animal are going to be tougher due to how much they're worked. So if for instance, if the animal is walking on all fours, the shoulder and the hind legs are going to be used most often. So those are going to be the most marbled, the toughest, and require the longer cooking time. Usually braising or some smoking or some sort of long with moisture cooking will really soften those up. Pork, like pork shoulder, if you cook that for like 2.5 hours in in liquid, it just becomes so tender. It's wonderful. And beef, like we know, when we make brisket and things like that, also becomes super tender after a long time as well. But I have here, I brought a couple of charts that show the primal breakdowns in pork and beef. I'm going to show these to you. Let's see if I can give you a little demonstration. Here's our beef cow. And the cuts that we mostly hear are brisket, chuck, rib, the short loin, the tenderloin, the sirloin, which is also top sirloin, bottom sirloin, the rump, the round, and the shank, flank, and the short plate. Those are the ones that we use most often. The brisket, the short plate, the flank, those are all excellent for barbecue. Flank is something that I like to use on the grill. It's something that is really good for long, slow cooking, but also for quick cooking as well. Sauteing for or searing for fajitas or on the grill. Flank steak is super versatile. The round, like we usually use those for roasts, and the rump roast, round roast, those are all something that requires a long period of cooking to get those to soften up. In moist, like braising or in stews, is something perfect for those. The sirloins and the tenderloins, those are our high premium cuts. Those are the ones that we like to put on the grill. Our filet mignon, our sirloin cuts that we see all the time at the grocery store, and the short loin too also has ribs in there. It's like, and then this is the rib here. This is your prime rib. This is where your prime rib cuts are. And then you have your your T-bone cuts and your porterhouse cuts. They're all cut from different parts of the animal. But there's the loin that goes straight through all of those, and that's what gives you that pork chop eye. And so let's say chuck. And so these are all worked very heavy, require long cooking, usually moist cooking. These are excellent for grilling, these are most good for barbecue as well. Here's a pig, here's a hog. For our purposes, we use the Boston butt, the picnic ham, the loin, the bacon, the spare ribs, and the back ham, which is, this is the picnic ham, this is the fresh ham. We use ham hocks, and the back fat we use as well often if you make your own lard or if you make sausages. But the Boston butt is excellent for barbecue because it breaks down super tender and moist. The loin is where we get our pork chops from, either bone in or bone out, or our loin roasts. These two, the hams, they're best for brining and low smoking over a long period of time to break those down, because they are used quite often. And the spare ribs and the bacon are just, two wonderful cuts as well. So those are just basic ideas of where the cuts are on the animals and how best to approach them when cooking. I'll answer any questions about these if you have any questions, and we can discuss these further when we talk. So we discussed a little bit about beef, a little bit about pork, and the components of each and how to cook them a little bit. What's the best way to cook them, dry cooking or moist cooking methods. One thing I wanted to discuss is give you just a basic idea of when they're done. When is your chicken done? When is your beef done? We like these thermometers because they tell us an exact internal temperature. But I like to say, as a rule, for safety and that it's going to be cooked all the way through, I like to cook fish to an internal temperature of at least 145 degrees. That's just like a nice, safe temperature where things are cooked and not overcooked for fish, but 145 is great for that. Poultry, I will cook to 165 degrees. I like to cook that pretty well, especially if you're cooking whole birds. It's important to take a measurement in the wing and also in the thigh as well, as close to the bone as possible to get that internal accurate temperature. So poultry, I like to pull at 165 or better. I believe those tabs on the turkeys pop at 180 degrees, something like that. So it gives you an idea. 165 is a good temperature to start with poultry, I think. Pork, 145 degrees. It's done. It's good. And it's safe too. Beef, when it comes to beef, if you want a rare steak, I would pull it at 125 degrees. Medium rare, 135. Medium, where it's nice and pink in the center, is going to be 145 degrees. Medium well, 155 degrees. Well done is 165 degrees or better for sure. And those are pretty accurate. You know, if you roast beef roast in the oven and you want it medium rare, if you pull it, it's 135 degrees in center, it's going to be medium rare. And as always with proteins, it's good to allow them to rest after we pull them out of the oven, after the cooking process, so that the juices remain in the meat instead of spreading out onto our plate or our platters. Allow it to rest for at least 5 or 10 minutes. Very good. I hope that is some helpful information. It seems like a lot of information, technical information, but hopefully it's helpful to you all. I think now what I'm going to do is switch over and we're going to try to prepare today's meal, which is going to be baked breaded chicken breast and some marinated roasted zucchini and some couscous. So I'm going to get to that right away. Here we go. I would like to start with the zucchini. I have cleaned and washed them, cut them into half moons, and the recipe says that I'm going to give you this recipe to everyone as well. 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar and 2 teaspoons of garlic, and I have these right here. And balsamic vinegar, 2 teaspoons of garlic, and I have my mustard. I used some Dijon mustard, and I had that in the bowl already. I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of sugar and a pinch of salt, which is about a teaspoon. Remember, that's about a teaspoon, 2 of those, and 1 good pinch of pepper. Okay, I'm going to mix all this together pretty well. It has the right color, which is nice. And it has the right smell. It's going to be sweet. It's going to be tangy from the garlic and the pepper. And it's nice and thick. The mustard will help to give it some richness and to help to hold it together. And the mustard also gives it some thickness and some tang in the flavor as well. So between that and the pepper, it is really nice. Simply pour it over our zucchini, like that. Mix this together pretty well. And now this is a marinade, so I would like to let this sit for at least a half hour or so. You should let it sit for 15 minutes as long as you can. If you can only do 10 minutes, then that's great. But the longer the better. If you can let this sit and marinate for a little while, it'll be just great. Everything is coated pretty well. I always, when I'm cooking, I like to try to balance out the flavors, the sweet, the sour, the tang, and the mouthfeel and everything. I like to balance all that out. I did about equal parts of sugar and balsamic vinegar. Try to get a good balance there. I like a little bit more tartness, so I keep a little bit higher, more sugar, more vinegar than sugar when I'm making my salad dressings and things. But yeah, usually I start with about equal parts and start from there. So that is all put together, and the zucchini is going to marinate. We're going to lay that onto our cookie sheet and put that into a 400-degree oven, and it's going to take probably close to about the same amount of time as the chicken does. The chicken might take a little bit longer, so we're going to try to time that as well as we can. For the chicken, we are going to combine in a bowl our plain breadcrumbs, because we plan on seasoning them ourselves. 1 cup of unseasoned breadcrumbs, and this is Romano cheese. I use a nice grated Romano cheese. You can use, this is a Pecorino Romano, which is a sharp sheep's milk cheese. It's an aged cheese, so it's going to be dry, and it's going to have a nice pungent, sharp taste to it. I like Pecorino because it has a little bit of salt, and I like the salt that it adds to whatever I'm cooking usually. You can also use your favorite Parmesan. You can add it to this as well, but I like to use the Romano. Again, I have some garlic powder, and I use garlic powder because it is basically just granulated garlic, nothing more. There's no salt added to it or anything like that. I buy this at the grocery store, and yeah, I like it. So I'm going to put this in here as well. Okay. And let's see, what else do we need? We need a little bit of salt and pepper. Not too much because we have the cheese, which is salty. The pepper, because we like it, I'm putting in 2. And then the important thing is the olive oil, because we're not using the eggs and the flour and stuff. We don't want our breading to fall off of our chicken breast. So what I like to do is I like to add enough olive oil to bring this breadcrumb mixture to a consistency of wet sand. And it turns out to be a lot. I think in the recipe, I said put in about 1/4 cup of olive oil to start. And we'll see what that looks like. I'm going to mix it together. And it still looks a little dry. It needs to be moist so that it will stick together and stay on the chicken during the cooking process. So it's a little bit more. At this point, you want to add just a little at a time, not too much, because you don't want it to be soggy. But that looks about there. And it smells great. It smells garlicky, smells cheesy, and the olive oil is really coming through as well. So I think that is just perfect. Okay. I'm going to leave that right there. Can you see that? Okay. Pack it down a little bit. See, it packs just like wet sand. It's perfect. So that is that. Here are our boneless, skinless chicken breasts. Nothing fancy. I got them at the grocery store. Put a little bit of salt and pepper. Now that is enough salt and pepper just to coat it. And I'm going to use the tongs because I don't want to get my hands dirty right now. So I'm going to do this and put a little salt and pepper on the other side as well. Now, I'm going to be using a roasting pan. You can use whatever you have, a cookie sheet or a roasting pan or something like that. I'm going to have enough olive oil in this recipe that I don't need to spray the bottom of the pan with a pan spray. I think the chicken will do just fine as far as not sticking. So I'm going to just take our chicken and place it on here like so. Okay, both of them like that. Here is our boneless, skinless chicken breast and our breadcrumb mixture. Right now, the zucchini is marinating, and I am preparing to cook the couscous by bringing the water to a boil, and we'll get to that in 1 second. But right now, I'm going to take and just lay the breadcrumbs on top of the chicken. I like to use my hands for this normally, but I'm going to use the spoon today. You're in your own kitchen, so you can do it however you like. And I am packing it down just a little bit. Like that. Like that. Just that last little bit. Seems like a lot of breadcrumbs. It is, but that's okay. It's going to be delicious. Okay. Okay, there you go. All right, good. There we go. We'll bake this in a 400-degree oven. These are fat chicken breasts, so they're probably going to take 20 to 25 minutes. I'm going to go put them in the oven now. We have just placed the chicken in the oven, and now I have zucchini, which has been marinating for a little while, probably about 10 minutes or so. Not very long, but long enough. And we're going to put that on our plate. I'm using just a regular cookie sheet here today. Try to keep it in one layer as much as possible. And we're going to put this into a 400-degree oven as well. And these are going to roast up and get nice and golden brown and delicious and crispy and lovely. So we're going to drop these in right now. So right now we have our chicken, our breaded chicken baking in the oven. That's going to go for about another 25 minutes or so. Our marinated zucchini is roasting in the oven as well. And that is probably going to go for about another 15 minutes or so. And I am going to go over to the stove in a minute and we'll cook the couscous. Just wanted to take a second to sort of recap. We talked a little bit about mise en place and getting organized and working cleanly in the kitchen, which leads us to good sanitation habits and being aware of time and temperature when we're cooking with proteins, and a little bit about protein, where they come from on the animal, a bit about primals and how they differ in consistency and composition and how best suited to cook them as well. and most importantly, when they're done. That's a nice chart. I'm going to give that to you in your packet as well, of knowing what temperatures to pull out the chicken and the beef and the pork from the oven when roasting or grilling or anything like that. So those charts will be really helpful for you as well in the kitchen. So I'm going to switch over to the stove now, and we'll cook the couscous, and we'll finish up with the rest of the meal in the oven. Things are cooking away. One of the things I wanted to make sure that I mentioned was the alternative sources of protein, like tofu. Tofu is a soy protein that is made with soy milk, and it is coagulated and pressed just like cheese is. It's made very much in the same way as cheese. It's packaged to us in a salt brine, and well, it's just a brine. And this is extra firm tofu, which I like to use because it has the best consistency. It does not break apart when I cook it. Sometimes you need to press it, put it on a perforated something, and put a weight on top and just let it press an hour, 20 minutes, overnight, whatever you've got, just to press some of the moisture out of it and to get it to be a little bit more even and solid consistency. Also, there is tempeh, which is soybean as well. That's a soy product, and that is fermented soybeans. And we usually see them packed together in and packaged in bricks and small, thin bricks. And seitan, which is a wheat gluten product, and that is something that is made very similar to mozzarella cheese, where it's stretched and put together, and then it forms into the gluten combines together, and then they usually give it to us in little bite-sized chunks, like beef tip points, something like that, about that size, little chunks. So tofu and tempeh are both soy products. Seitan is wheat product, and I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned those. Our chicken is in the oven. It's coming close to temp. It's about 145, 150 degrees internal temperature. Our zucchini is just about done. It's getting a little bit crispy and nice. We are cooking the couscous here now. On the recipe, it says in a medium saucepan, combine 1¼ cups of water and 2 teaspoons of olive oil. And I added a tablespoon of my fresh chives to that as well. And that is all to prepare 1 cup of couscous. And that's all in there already. Here's the couscous. Can you see that? It's like little pasta balls, little pastina. It's made with the dough, and they agitate it flat, and it comes out in little balls, and then they dry it that way. It cooks in no time at all. The directions say to bring the water to a boil, shut it off, add the couscous. I like to give it a quick stir just to combine it all. Put the lid back on and let it sit for at least 5 minutes, and it will be cooked just like that. The heat is off. The water's in there. The olive oil's in there. I put a little bit of salt and about a tablespoon of fresh chives, 1 cup of plain couscous, and shut the heat off, and it's going to rest for about 5 minutes. We'll pull out the rest of the meal and see how done that is and how it looks, and then I will put some on a plate for you to check it out. Here is our roasted zucchini. I wanted to show this to you while it's just finishing up. All done. The zucchini is soft. It's totally cooked. It's beautiful. It's marinated. I'm going to put some on the plate so we can see how it looks. Okay, so let's take a look at our chicken. I'm going to pull that out of the oven now and see how it looks. How does it look? Does it look good? I think it looks pretty good. Breadcrumbs stayed on. They are golden brown, and they look just delicious. I'll take one of these and put them on here. Lovely. That reads 165, 67 degrees. And lastly, we have our couscous, which has been sitting for about 7-8 minutes. And can you see? It's done. It's completely cooked. Just going to flake it like this with my fork, and it is dry and lovely. not stuck together, perfectly cooked. Okay, here you go. So we have our breaded chicken made with olive oil, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and unseasoned breadcrumbs, marinated roasted zucchini, which is lovely with balsamic vinegar. Of course, you can use any sort of vinegar, any flavorings that you like, and some fresh couscous that I made with some fresh chives. Um, so all in all, this meal took about an hour and a half to create because I was doing it as a demonstration. But normally this should take about a half hour, 40 minutes. If you're prepared and ready, you could probably have this done in a half hour for sure. So I hope that's nice. I hope it's helpful. Let me know what you think about this style of cooking and this particular meal. We are going to try to recreate this in the class when we are all together. So see if you can have your ingredients together and ready to roll, all your mise en place, your pans and everything like that. I can answer any questions that you have leading up to the classes and things like that. So send me an email and I will be talking to you soon. All right, great. Thank you very much. And we'll see you for the next cooking class number 3.